So it wasn't until I went to high school that I really felt like a middle child. For context, I have an older brother, Ryan, and a younger sister, Ashley. So when Ryan was a senior in high school, I was a freshman, and then when I became a senior, my sister was a freshman. This dynamic allowed me to get closer with each of them individually for different reasons. And those bonds that I created back then have definitely built up over time until now. So what is the middle child syndrome? To define it, I pulled it from good old reliable WebMD. And they state that it consists of being rebellious, less likely to act out against their parents, sociable, being good mediators and wanting fairness, and being a good team member, having a stronger sense of not belonging than their siblings, feeling overshadowed, come believe that their parents don't care about them, mobile, being the first sibling to move out of their childhood home, most likely to move the furthest away, and not perfectionists. They tend to do something that the older sibling isn't as good at. For example, if the older sibling is a scholar, the younger sibling might focus on being more athletic. And who knows me better than my siblings? So first stop is Los Angeles to visit Ryan. For context, Ryan is 2 years older than me and has lived in California his whole life, both in NorCal and SoCal. Sometimes my bones don't remember. First question is, how do you view our sibling dynamic in the context of being the oldest?
Being the oldest, I think there's two things. One, growing up with you and Ashley, our younger sister, it was very much a watch my back situation, kind of leading by example of how I go through life and kind of like how I live my life. Not necessarily in the way that you guys need to follow my footsteps, but showing you guys an example of the best possible person that I can be that inspires you guys to be yourselves. I think after we've kind of all become adults and grew up later in life, I think now the sibling dynamic is, you know how like your chosen friends become your chosen family? I think now we've moved into the relationship where your family become your friends. It's more so being there for you guys as an older brother, but more importantly, like as a friend, for any advice that you guys come to me, and then also just kind of like living our lives parallel and concurrently to each other.
Do you think that your birth order has influenced your personality?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think any oldest child out there would definitely agree with me that the over dramatization of it is, you know, we went to war for our younger siblings, is that we had to get kind of like the rawest versions of our parents and kind of pave the way with our parents, and kind of no matter how many siblings you have, every step down of the sibling almost kind of has it easier, where you could look at it another way, the parents care less and less about each one of the siblings. So oldest children, I see you are seen. It's not easy, but at the same time, I don't know, some youngest children also have it harder because maybe they didn't get as much attention or pressure from their parents, and pressure is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you want that pressure from your parents. Like I, later in my life, am grateful for the pressure that I got from mom and dad.
Like in the moment of like the pressure especially, I think it sucks, and I saw that from kind of a third party perspective, but I think it's now being able to look at that retrospectively is something that I think definitely made you into the very driven and competitive person that has allowed you to accomplish a lot of things. So what do you know about the middle child syndrome?
You are like the walking embodiment. You are the like the articulation of like the middle child syndrome. You had the fortunate environment in which being the second boy and the middle child is that you got away with a lot of not necessarily having to deal with mom and dad that much. It's both a blessing and a curse, where it's like you didn't have to experience a lot of the pressure that they had placed on me, but at the same time, like I said before, it's like pressure is also a good thing, attention is a good thing. It's just a person in general, like you want the attention of the people that you care about, and sometimes that has a negative effect as the middle child, where maybe you want a little bit more attention from mom and dad, whether it's good attention or bad attention. Sometimes attention is still desired. You kind of grew up the most independent of the three of us because that was just the environment that you had to grow up in. It's an opportunity for middle children, if they aren't getting the same quantity of attention from their parents. Agency is in your hands, so for you, it's like chosen family, chosen support system. So like you're able to go out and find that from friends. Not to say that like oldest, youngest, any other chronological hierarchy of siblings, it's like everyone has that agency. But I think the forcing factor is a little bit stronger for middle children growing up in traditional dynamic that like the three of us had.
Do you think that I fit this middle child stereotype?
That whole description from WebMD is like almost like a generic, generalized statement about just the social dynamic of someone who is younger than another person in the same like family situation. Choosing a path that the older sibling is not as good at kind of makes sense that anybody would do that. I don't think that you fit that mold, if there even is a mold of a middle child. You're definitely different from me in a lot of ways, but similar to me in a lot of ways. If you fit any sort of definition of a middle child, like the reason why I think of you like as a middle child in the middle child syndrome sense is because you really, like you're able to fly under the radar and you're less emotionally opinionated than myself or Ashley. Like I think the mediator part of the definition like kind of holds true. I think you're less of a mediator and more of like an abstainer. Like you just walk away from conversations rather than like mediate those things. It's like you have less of a stake. Whereas like if I'm having an argument with Ashley or I'm having an argument with our parents, it's like you won't take a side. It's not that you won't mediate, so you just won't take a side, which is fine. And it's like, that's like, I think that is a product of being the middle child, of like not necessarily picking a side, but picking the middle road. In my own projection of like what a middle child is, you're your own version of it, which is why I say that like you hold like the middle child syndrome.
Yeah, and I feel like just like any kind of stereotypes when it comes to, you know, personality tests or any of those, like the Myers-Briggs, I feel like that those are all like generalized and everyone is going to have their own like nuanced things about them. But people will be like, oh yeah, like that's totally me, when they're all just like generalized kind of like personality traits. I think it's just like good to understand like, oh, there are these kind of like stereotypes. Do I fit that like mold in certain ways? That maybe like help you understand like a little bit better. It's like, oh, I never thought of like me possibly being in that way.
Like almost like social models that you can like use as benchmarks to like understand yourself a little bit better. And like that's also why people latch on to astrological signs. But it's like that's like a safety blanket for some people to better understand their own personality. My point is that yes, you are a middle child, but at the same time, like you're your own definition of a middle child and not in any conventional form.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Next up is Ashley. She's 4 years younger than me and also lives in New York, but lived in California her whole life before that. How do you view our sibling dynamic?
I am the youngest and the only girl. Ryan and I are 6 years apart, so I think that plays a huge role in the fact that you and I are closer than Ryan and I. And I think it's also important to note that like our hobbies are a little bit similar. Growing up, we both danced. You and Ryan both played water polo, so you guys had that connection. And obviously the brother dynamic between a sister and brother dynamic is a little bit different. But from the youngest point of view, I think having two older brothers, you kind of want to keep up with them. So with sports, you get very competitive, and I think that's where my tomboy side comes out.
Do you think that birth order has affected your personality?
Being the youngest and the only girl, I feel very grateful for that. I mean, being the youngest, obviously, like, you're used to hand-me-downs, but I guess that's different for me because I was the only girl, so I didn't really get that, and I'm sure you got that from Ryan. I think I have such a close relationship with Dad because I saw you guys, and when you think of a boy, like, you think of sports, and so, like, I wanted to get into that because I wanted to be able to connect with you guys on that level, because it's not like you guys were playing dolls with me, like, you guys were playing sports, and so, like, that was my way of connecting with you both, and I think that's what also brought me super close to dad because I got super into sports, so I would watch sports with dad and obviously like sports cars and whatnot. And so I think personality wise, if I hadn't grown up with two older brothers, I feel like I wouldn't be as tomboy as I am.
Yeah, but I feel like what's interesting is you definitely obviously still had like the girly side to you. You know, obviously playing with like American Girl dolls. You know, I this is something a little bit embarrassing for myself, but something that, you know, I remember as like a kid was like playing with Littlest Pet Shop, like little like figurines with you. Because I think for me, you know, being the middle child meant being able to bond both with you and Ryan in different ways. And for me, it was being able to not compromise, but being able to find that middle ground. I know that like mom would always harp on you growing up of like, Ashley, be more like ladylike, or dad would always be like, oh, mom, like why aren't you telling Ashley to do X, Y, or Z? It's interesting because, you know, I think from your perspective, you looked at Ryan and I and not mimicked, but definitely picked up a lot of the traits and thought that was just normal.
Yeah, because I think growing up, I looked up to you guys so much, and so kind of in the sense where I like mimicked your guys' love for sports and whatnot, but I think I also had my own personality, I guess, to it, where like, for example, like when I was growing up, like in middle school, I'd be out on the soccer field with the boys, but you could spot me because I'd have a bright pink bow in my hair, and I'd be wearing like a skirt, but I'd be playing with the boys, so it's like I was like a girly girl tomboy.
Next question is, what do you know about the middle child stereotype?
I think this is funny that you asked this question because I feel like when I tell people I have two older brothers, they always want to know the dynamics and the difference between, because there's three of us. The stereotypes around being a middle child is being the middleman and kind of doing your own thing and being very independent, not relying on people, which is very different from, like, for example, Ryan, who was the first grandson for very long and also the oldest, and me, who was one of two of however many cousins that we have of girls and being the youngest as well. When I tell people, when they ask about my brothers, I always say that Justin is the epitome of a middle child.
Based off of that definition, do you think that I fit that kind of middle stereotype?
Now that I think about it, I think you are the epitome of a middle child, but I also think that you're not. I think being a middle child has a lot of negative stereotypes, and some could be positive, like what you're listing of like being a mediator, being sociable. I think those are very positive characteristics, but I think also there is a negative stigma around being a middle child. I always tell my friends, like, Justin is one of the only people that I will go to the ends of earth with because I care so much about him, and he has a heart of gold, and I think that's maybe something different from what a normal middle child would be characterized as. You never really took on that role as a middle child, but I think like you were a younger brother to Ryan and you were an older brother to me, so it's different. I don't know.
I think because of that overlap in high school that I had both of those dynamics.
Ryan and I only overlapped during Pegasus, but like even then it was a 6-year age gap, so there was just such a huge difference. So I think that really, the age gap really played a role in Justin's position in the family.
Well, appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
One of the biggest takeaways that I had with my conversations with Ashley and Ryan were that as kind of a middle child, or any sibling for that matter, is the dynamics and traits of each child kind of changes as you get older. As each of us become our own person and we continue to grow, it shifts kind of the relationships that you have with your siblings as you gain different perspectives and understandings of life. You stop caring so much about the bickering and who started the fight, and more about if your sibling is genuinely happy with where they are in life, and just making sure that they're doing okay.
I don't think that we're f***ed up, no. I don't think that we messed up if you don't.
There's There's something about the sibling bond that's super unique and really no one can take away from you. It makes me appreciate the relationships that I have as both an older and younger brother to Ryan and Ashley. Maybe being a middle child isn't so bad after all.
Take all the smiles faked, all the soul earthquakes. It's no wonder we're still wondering.
Ooh, look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Look at the